There exists a crown that remains invisible to all eyes, and a throne that has never stood within any palace walls. When you find yourself wondering why certain women carry a presence that requires no explanation whatsoever, you are already touching upon the mystery of that final stage Carl Jung described, a stage that only a select few ever manage to attain. This is not a title that gets bestowed upon anyone. This represents a frequency that you gradually become. Within the next several minutes, you will come to comprehend why this stage proves so exceptionally rare, and simultaneously why it both attracts and frightens you. You will discover what inner deaths must occur before the authentic queen within you can awaken. And perhaps, just perhaps, you will sense that you stand closer than you ever imagined. For this journey does not commence with a grand gesture, but rather with a quiet realization that you have stopped explaining yourself to others. Write truth in the comments if you sense this. The world recognizes crowns crafted from gold and ceremonies filled with grandeur. Yet the crown we speak of here bears no precious gems. It remains invisible to those who perceive only with their physical eyes. Jung characterized individuation as a process through which the psyche separates itself from the collective and discovers its authentic self. However, he also spoke of a point where even the identity of the individuated person must be released. This is the moment when external validation falls silent and only internal certainty remains. Do you know this moment when you cease questioning whether you are enough and simply know that you exist? Most individuals spend their entire existence attempting to ascend a throne that never truly belonged to them. They wait for permission, for recognition, for the approval of some invisible authority. The final stage of the queen begins precisely where this waiting ends. It commences when you recognize that the throne you have been waiting for was always an illusion. The kingdom you wish to inherit has always resided within you. But to see this, you first needed to remove all masks, including those you believe to be your true face. There exists an archetype within human consciousness that Jung called the self. It is not the ego, not the persona, not the role you perform. It represents the totality of your being, the unity of all contradictions within you. To reach this self, you must pass through layers of identities you believe to be yourself. The daughter, the mother, the lover, the warrior. All these roles carry truth within them, yet none of them is the whole. The queen we discuss is the one who has integrated all roles, while no longer identifying with any single one. Imagine you have spent your entire life constructing a castle, stone by stone, with sweat and tears. One day you recognize that this castle stands on foreign ground. It was erected according to the plans of others, according to your parents' expectations, society's judgments, the desires of those you loved. What do you do then? Do you remain in this castle because you have invested so much? Or do you dare to tear it down and begin anew, this time on your own foundation? This is the first initiation on the path to the final stage, the destruction of what was never truly yours. In depth psychology, Jung's work includes the concept of the complex. A complex is an emotionally charged pattern that unconsciously controls our behavior. One of the most powerful is the complex of the eternal daughter, that inner attitude that always waits for permission, that never quite dares to enter the room. Perhaps you know this feeling. You are an adult, competent, strong, and yet there are moments when you feel like a child asking for approval. This is not a sign of weakness. It is a sign that an old archetype is still active. The queen can only be born when the eternal daughter dies, not in hatred, not in rejection, but in loving acknowledgement of what was. There exists a pain that goes deeper than any external wound. It is the pain of recognizing that you have been waiting for something that will never come. Perhaps it was the recognition of a mother who, herself, never learned to recognize herself. Perhaps it was the permission of a father who himself was never free. Jung called this the confrontation with the parental imagos, the internal images of our parents that continue to live within us, independently of the real persons. To become the queen, you must release these imagos from their power. This does not mean betraying your parents. It means stopping the practice of allowing ghosts to govern your life. The Great Mother is an archetype that both nourishes and devours. In her light form, she gives life, warmth, security. In her dark form, she holds tight, suffocates, refuses to let go. Every son carries both aspects of this archetype within themselves. The challenge lies in honoring the nourishing force without succumbing to the devouring power. Have you ever noticed how you feel guilty when you live your own life? How an invisible voice whispers that you are selfish when you place your own needs first? This is the voice of the devouring mother, not necessarily your real mother, but rather the internal pattern that has learned to understand self-sacrifice as love. The transmutation of this pattern is one of the most painful and liberating experiences on the path to the inner queen. It is the moment when you recognize that you owe nothing to anyone, not even to those who gave you birth. This sounds harsh, perhaps even brutal, yet it is the simple truth of individuation. You did not come to this world to live the unfulfilled dreams of others. You came to unfold your own being. When you accept this, a burden falls from your shoulders that you have carried so long you had forgotten what it feels like to stand upright. Write quote 1 in the comments if you are ready for this. There exists a paradox in this process that only those who have gone through it understand. The more authentic you become, the more people you will lose. Not because you distance yourself from them, but because they can no longer endure the new frequency you radiate. Jung spoke of the loneliness of individuation. It is not a loneliness that arises from lack, but from fullness. You are so completely with yourself that there is no more room for the old games, the compromises, the contortions. And the people who loved you for your adaptability suddenly no longer recognize you. This is one of the hardest tests on the path to the final stage. Will you return to the familiarity of the old roles just to avoid being alone? Or will you accept loneliness as a gift, as a space in which your true nature can finally unfold? The queen who reaches this stage has learned that loneliness does not mean isolation. It means being so completely with yourself that the absence of others is not experienced as a lack. She is not lonely, she is sovereign. In alchemy, which Jung understood as a symbol for psychic transformation, there is a stage called nigredo, the blackening. It is the phase of dissolution, in which everything you believed yourself to be disintegrates. After that comes albedo, the whitening, the purification, and finally rubedo, the reddening, the integration. But there exists one more step beyond this that only a few alchemists mention. It is the stage in which even gold loses its significance. You have completed the work, the opus magnum, the great transformation. And then you recognize that even this completion is just another cloak you can remove. The final stage of the queen is not the coronation. It is the uncoronation. It is the moment when you have become so thoroughly the queen that you no longer need the crown. Your sovereignty is so integrated that it requires no symbol. You no longer rule over a kingdom. You are the kingdom. Write quote 2 in the comments if you accept your kingdom. And within this being lies a freedom that no words can describe. Jung spoke of the self as the center of the psyche, the point at which all opposites come to rest. The ego, the small I, believes it is the center, but the self is larger, wiser, quieter. It observes the ego with compassion, without identifying with it. When you reach this level, something curious happens. You lose interest in your own story, not because it would be unimportant, but because it no longer defines who you are. You are no longer the woman who has suffered. You are no longer the heroine who has overcome. You simply are. And within this simple being lies a power greater than any role you have ever played. There exists a concept in Jungian psychology that few truly understand. It is the golden shadow. We all know the dark shadow, that part of us we reject, repress, deny, the anger, the envy, the greed. But there also exists a light shadow, a golden shadow. These are the parts of us we consider too powerful, too radiant, too large. The parts we hide out of fear of being too much. The queen within you is part of this golden shadow. You have held her back your entire life, not because she was evil, but because she seemed too threatening. Do you remember the moments when you held back your opinion because you were afraid of appearing arrogant? The times when you dimmed your light so that others would feel more comfortable? The situations in which you downplayed what you had achieved, out of fear of envy? This is the golden shadow in action. Society, especially when it comes to women, has for centuries portrayed power and sovereignty as something dangerous. A powerful woman is a threat. A sovereign woman needs no one. And a woman who needs no one eludes control. The integration of the golden shadow means reclaiming this hidden power. It means saying, quote, 3. This sounds like egotism, like coldness, but in truth, it is the opposite. Only when you no longer need anyone can you truly love. Only when you govern yourself can you enter relationships that are based on freedom, not on dependency. The queen who has integrated her golden shadow threatens no one. She liberates. There exists an energy that has slumbered within you for a long time. Perhaps you felt it as a child, before the world taught you to hide it. It is the energy of sacred rage, of clear boundaries, of the unambiguous no. Women have been taught that anger is unfeminine, that clarity is harsh, that boundaries are loveless. And so generations of women have buried this energy deep within themselves, until it became an internal volcano that simmers beneath the surface. Jung called such repressed energies complexes. They continue to live in the unconscious and take control in unexpected moments. The queen in her final stage has learned to channel this energy. She is no longer angry because she has integrated the anger. She no longer needs to defend boundaries because she rests so clearly in her sovereignty that transgressions are simply not possible. Her presence alone communicates where her boundary lies, and people sense this without a word needing to be spoken. This is the power we speak of, not aggressive power, not dominating power, but power that springs from absolute clarity about oneself. Have you ever noticed how certain people enter a room and the atmosphere changes? Without them doing anything, without them saying anything, suddenly there is a presence that permeates everything. This is not manipulation, not a technique. It is the result of inner integration. When you have reclaimed and integrated all your shadows, both the dark and the golden, then you radiate a coherence that cannot be explained, but can be felt. The queen in her final stage is this coherence. She is no longer fragmented, she is whole. Jung described the process of individuation as lifelong. There is no end, no point at which you can say, now I am finished. But there are plateaus, levels at which a certain completeness has been achieved. The final stage of the queen is such a plateau. It is not the end of the journey, but it is a point at which the fundamental transformation is complete. You no longer need to struggle, no longer need to prove, no longer need to become. You are. And in this being lies a stillness deeper than any peace you have known before. But here, something paradoxical happens. In the moment when you have fully become this queen, she too begins to dissolve. Not in a collapse, but in a further transcendence. You recognize that even the identity of the queen is just another concept, another form that envelops the formlessness of your true being. The self of which Jung spoke identifies with nothing. It is pure being, pure presence without form, without name, without history. The final stage is therefore not arriving in the role of the queen. It is letting go of even this role. It is the recognition that you are neither daughter, nor mother, nor queen. You are the consciousness that has lived through all these roles without ever being defined by anyone. This is the highest freedom. You are no longer bound to any identity, not even to the most beautiful, most powerful, most sublime. You are simply that which you have always been. Consciousness, being, life itself. Imagine you have climbed a mountain, for years, through storms and darkness. Finally, you reach the summit. You stand there, proud, triumphant. And then after a while you notice that the summit itself is just another point on the journey. That it was not about arriving at the top, but about living the climb itself. The queen in her final stage stands on this summit and smiles not because she has arrived, but because she understands that it was never about arriving. It was always about the becoming, the being, living through each phase with full presence. There exists a solitude at this height that only those who have been there know. It is not a sad solitude. It is the solitude of the eagle that flies above the clouds. You see the world from above, understand connections that are invisible from below, but you can no longer descend and explain to others what you see, not because you do not want to, but because words fail. This level of recognition cannot be conveyed. It can only be experienced, and that is all right. The queen, in her final stage, no longer needs witnesses. She needs no confirmation. Her being is sufficient unto itself. In alchemy, there was the concept of the lapis philosophorum, the philosopher's stone. It was the goal of all efforts, the substance that could transform everything. But the true alchemists knew that the stone could not be found on the outside. It was the symbol for the transformed soul, for the integrated self. The queen, in her final stage, is this stone. She has transformed herself into gold, not into the gold of greed or external wealth, but into the gold of inner completeness. And this gold shines even when no one sees it. It is important to understand that this process does not proceed linearly. There are setbacks, moments when old patterns resurface. This is not failure. It is part of the spiral. Jung described the development of the psyche as a spiral, not as a straight line. You always return to similar themes, but on a higher level. Each time you understand more deeply, integrate more completely. The queen in her final stage knows this spiral. She knows that even after the greatest transformation, shadows can still appear, but she no longer fears them. She welcomes them as old acquaintances who have one last lesson to teach her. What does it mean to be a queen without a kingdom? It means that your sovereignty does not depend on external circumstances. You can live in a palace or in a simple hut. You can be surrounded by people or completely alone. Your inner state remains untouched. This is true freedom. Not the freedom to do what you want, but the freedom to be who you are, independent of circumstances. The world can change around you, collapse, reorganize. You remain in your center. This kind of stability is not rigid. It is not the solidity of a rock, but the flexibility of bamboo that bends in the storm without breaking. The queen in her final stage has learned to flow with life without losing her center. She knows when she must yield and when she must remain steadfast. But these decisions do not come from the mind. They come from a deep inner wisdom that cannot be explained but can be felt. Jung spoke of synchronicity, of meaningful coincidences that occur when the psyche is in harmony with the greater whole. The queen in her final stage experiences these synchronicities frequently, not because she does something special, but because she is so aligned that life can flow through her. Doors open, people appear at the right time, opportunities arise from nothing. This is not magic. It is the natural result of a psyche that no longer fights against itself. There exists a transmission that emanates from the queen in her final stage, even when she is silent. Her mere existence changes the field around her. People in her vicinity begin to remember their own sovereignty, without words needing to be exchanged. This is the invisible legacy Jung spoke of when he discussed the effect of the individuated person on the collective. You do not change the world by trying to change others. You change the world by becoming completely yourself. Your integration triggers something in the collective unconscious that reverberates across generations. Imagine you are a stone thrown into a pond. The waves you create spread out, touch the shore, return, overlap with other waves. You do not see all the effects of your entry, but they exist. The queen in her final stage is this stone. Her immersion into the completeness of her being creates waves she will never see, but she knows they are there, and that is enough. The question that may now stir within you is, how do I reach this stage? And the answer is paradoxical. You do not reach it by trying to reach it. You reach it by ceasing to try. Every attempt to become the queen comes from the ego, from the small I that wants to achieve, prove, become something. True transformation happens when the ego gives up, when it recognizes that it cannot create the queen, because the queen is already there. She has always been there. You simply needed to let go of everything that covered her. This does not mean you should do nothing. It means that your doing no longer springs from lack, but from fullness. You no longer meditate to become enlightened, but because stillness is your nature. You no longer set boundaries to protect yourself, but because clarity is your essence. You no longer love to be loved, but because love is what you are. Do you see the difference? It is subtle, yet it changes everything. The final stage of the queen is not spectacular. There are no fanfares, no witnesses, no external signs. It is an inner arrival, a quiet knowing that you have finally arrived at yourself. And this arrival is simultaneously a letting go. You have arrived and at the same time are bound nowhere. You are the queen and simultaneously no longer an identity. You are everything and nothing. And in this paradox lies the truth that no words can capture. If you have listened this far, then you are ready. Not ready in the sense of complete or perfect, but ready in the sense of open. Open to the possibility that within you already lives a force that is only waiting to be recognized. The queen within you is not a distant vision. She is the stillness between your thoughts. She is the clarity that sometimes breaks through the fog of your doubts. She is the voice that whispers, "You are enough. You have always been enough." The journey to the final stage is not a journey to a destination. It is a journey to yourself, through yourself, as yourself. And this journey never truly ends. It only deepens, becomes quieter, becomes more essential. The Queen knows this. She smiles at the notion of ever arriving, for she understands that being itself is the arrival. Every breath, every moment in which you are fully present, is the final stage, not in the future. Now, if these words have touched something within you, if you sense that here lies a truth you have always known, write "Queen" in the comments as a sign of your arrival. The Queen within you no longer waits, she is. Let us rest together in this being.